Picture this. Buenos Aires, late 2001. You are a middle-class professional who did everything right. Overnight, the government freezes your bank account. The money you spent decades saving is legally untouchable, and your family is hungry today. By the end of this video, you will understand the exact mechanics of the parallel economies that immediately replace failed currencies and why your local network is a harder asset than gold. The first thing to understand is that collapse does not announce itself like a film. It arrives as an inconvenience. A queue outside an ATM, a cashier who wants cash, not a card, a pharmacist who shrugs, a landlord who suddenly prefers dollars. Then, in a matter of days, the normal world splits in two. On one side is the official story. Your deposits still exist. The banking system is being stabilized. Temporary controls are necessary. Order is being maintained. On the other side is the forensic reality. Your balance is intact, but your money no longer clears the things that keep a household alive this week. Not in the market stall. Not in the taxi. Not in the neighborhood pharmacy. Not in the informal labor economy where real survival begins. That is where most people make the fatal mistake. They imagine crisis as a test of what they own. History suggests it is a test of what they can exchange, what they can repair, and who will still pick up the phone when official money stops moving. This is not a story about heroic self-sufficiency. It is about what replaces currency first, and why the people who survive the opening phase are usually the ones already tied into a living network of trust. In December 2001, Argentina gave the world a clean forensic lesson in the difference between nominal wealth and usable wealth. The event is remembered as the Corralito. In practical terms, it meant withdrawal restrictions. People who had lived inside the banking system, trusted salary deposits, paid taxes, kept records, and followed the rules discovered that legal ownership and physical access were no longer the same thing. That distinction sounds technical until you watch what it does to a household. A professional family can survive a newspaper headline. It cannot survive a broken settlement chain. Rent still has to be paid. Food still has to be bought. A child still needs medicine the same day. Not after a policy committee restores confidence. Once cash withdrawals are capped, every purchase turns into a negotiation between official permission and real-world acceptability. And that is when a currency begins to fail in the only way that matters to ordinary people. Not when the state says it is invalid, but when it stops moving daily necessities at street level. This is why bank crises produce such psychological violence. The account statement still shows numbers. The television still uses the language of reassurance. The institutions still tell you the system is functioning, but the mother at the butcher counter, the man trying to pay the electrician, the retiree at the pharmacy, they're already living in a different monetary regime. Now add the second fracture. In Argentina, distrust did not stay confined to the banks. It spread outward into contracts, wages, pricing, and time itself. Sellers wanted harder payment. Buyers wanted immediate access. Everyone became less willing to part with useful goods for claims that might degrade before the week ended. When that happens, official money loses social velocity long before it disappears legally. This is the point most financial commentary misses. A currency crisis is not just a price event. It is a coordination event. The old system fails because too many participants no longer trust that today's payment will preserve tomorrow's purchasing power. So they begin searching, almost instinctively, for other ways to clear value. And those other ways are not theoretical. They appear fast. They appear locally. They appear among people who already know each other's skills, habits, and reliability. That is why the first true replacement for a failing currency is usually not gold, not a grand ideological alternative, and not some distant reserve asset. It is a smaller, rougher, more intimate system built around immediate utility and trust. Argentina built one at enormous scale. And once you see how it worked, The lone wolf myth starts to collapse. The Argentine answer was not elegant. It was not clean. It was not free of fraud, hierarchy, or improvisation. But it was real. And for a time, it worked. It was called the True EK system, a vast barter network that expanded through neighborhood exchange clubs as the formal economy tightened and cash became harder to use. In theory, barter sounds primitive. In practice, the Argentine version was highly structured. People did not simply wander into a square trading shoes for tomatoes. They entered organized exchange nodes, brought goods or services, and used community-issued credits to facilitate multilateral trade. That detail matters. Pure barter has a built-in weakness known as the double coincidence of wants. I have bread. You have soap. Trade only works if I want soap at the exact moment you want bread. That is too inefficient to support large populations under stress. The True networks solve this by creating a local unit of account inside the network. Instead of needing a perfect one-to-one swap, members could provide value to one participant and spend those credits with another. In other words, the network rebuilt one of the core functions of money without waiting for the official currency to recover. Now move from theory to street level. A school teacher brings homemade food. A mechanic offers repair hours. A seamstress alters clothes. A retiree trades preserved goods. A nurse offers basic care. Someone else brings cleaning supplies, vegetables, baked bread, secondhand shoes, batteries, soap, or transport help. What looks from the outside like a desperate substitute is, from the inside, a survival clearinghouse. The important point is that these networks did not grow because people suddenly became ideological anti-capitalists. They grew because the official settlement system was no longer reliable enough to move ordinary life. Barter was not a protest. It was a workaround. And like every workaround, it revealed what a society actually values under pressure. Credentials mattered less than conversion. Status mattered less than usefulness. The person who could restore function to a broken object, treat an infection, move goods, prepare food, sew, fix wiring, cut hair, clean water containers, watch children, or maintain a small engine had an exchangeable position inside the new economy. The person whose role depended on bureaucracy, abstraction, or institutional prestige often discovered that his social rank did not survive first contact with scarcity. That is the hidden lesson of True Key. A crisis economy does not erase value. It reprices it brutally. But there was another mechanism underneath the mechanism: trust. These barter clubs were never just about items. They were about credibility. People needed some basis for accepting a promise, a voucher, a service claim, or a homemade product. In stable times, institutions provide that layer impersonally. In unstable times, neighborhoods, clubs, repeated contact, and reputation begin to replace it. The network becomes its own enforcement system. If you cheat too often, dilute the goods, issue worthless claims, or fail to deliver, you do not just lose money, you lose access. That is why the True model matters beyond Argentina. It shows that when official money weakens, communities do not revert to chaos first. They often attempt something more sophisticated, a local, reputation-backed exchange architecture built from practical needs, not because it is ideal, because dinner still has to happen, and once that becomes the governing reality. The next question is no longer what looks valuable in peacetime. It is what actually moves when fear, scarcity, and uncertainty enter the room. That is where most romantic ideas about wealth begin to fail. This is where survival mythology usually collides with the record. People love symbolic stores of value because they feel clean, permanent, above politics. Gold sits at the center of that imagination. And over long periods in certain kinds of monetary disorder, it can preserve wealth. But the opening stage of breakdown is not a seminar on long-duration value storage. It is a test of immediate conversion. Under siege conditions, that hierarchy becomes brutally visible. In Sarajevo, The items that ruled daily life were not always the ones that looked most prestigious before the crisis. Fuel, cigarettes, lighters, canned food, batteries, candles, medicine, antibiotics, water containers, and anything that could produce heat, light, or treatment moved fast because they solved immediate problems. They cleared locally. They were divisible. People understood them. They answered tonight's emergency. Gold often failed that first test for a simple reason. It was too far removed from the urgent transaction. A person with a gold coin still needed someone willing to make change, trust purity, agree on value, and part with something essential in return. In a stressed neighborhood economy, that is a high-friction trade. A lighter does not have that problem. A course of antibiotics does not have that problem. A working flashlight battery does not have that problem. Their value is obvious, immediate, and measurable in lived terms. This is the rule I want you to keep in mind. In the early phase of currency failure or siege conditions, utility beats symbolism. That does not mean precious metals are worthless. It means they occupy a different layer of the survival hierarchy. They may preserve value across borders, across longer time horizons, or through later stage remonetization. But when the question is whether your child eats, whether your mother gets treated, whether your apartment has light, or whether your stove works, the market clears first through useful goods, practical services, and trusted relationships. The same applies to paper wealth. A brokerage statement, a pension promise, a salary grade, a property valuation, even a pile of cash in the wrong denomination can all become strangely ornamental if they cannot bridge the gap between nominal ownership and usable necessity. This is why so many people misread collapse. They think in balance sheet terms when they should be thinking in conversion terms. What can be divided? What can be verified instantly? What solves pain now? What can be exchanged without an appraiser, a banker, a lawyer, or a functioning institution? Once you ask those questions honestly, the social pecking order starts to rearrange itself. And that rearrangement does not just apply to objects, it applies even more violently to people. In stable societies, many people confuse income category with survival value. They assume the person with the better office, cleaner hands, or more prestigious credentials occupies the safer position. Crisis has a way of exposing which roles are real in the oldest sense of the word. The plumber eats. The electrician eats. The mechanic eats. The medic eats. The woman who can preserve food, organize childcare, sterilize tools, repair clothing, and keep a household functioning under stress eats. The man whose status depended on managing paper claims inside a fragile institutional machine may discover very quickly that he is wealthy only in the language of the vanished system. This is not an insult to knowledge work. It is a reordering of exchange value under pressure. When currency credibility breaks, people search for labor that restores function, reduces risk or protects health. A blocked drain, a contaminated wound, a dead battery system, a broken window seal, a damaged water line, a child who needs watching while adults secure food. These are not abstract economic categories. They are survival bottlenecks. The people who can relieve them become liquid. That is the word. Liquid, not liquid in the banking sense. Liquid in the human sense. Easily convertible into food, help, protection, goodwill, and reciprocal obligation. This is why the smartest preparation is not merely stockpiling. It is reclassifying yourself. You need to know with some honesty how your household appears inside a stressed local economy. Are you a consumer of stability or a producer of usable value? If formal salaries stopped mattering for 90 days, what would your family be known for? Could you repair? Could you treat? Could you transport? Could you mediate disputes? Could you cook at scale? Could you store water safely? Could you help elderly neighbors manage medicine schedules? Could you test power systems, patch roofs, manage sanitation, or translate official confusion into practical action? That inventory matters more than people think. because barter networks do not emerge from ideology. They emerge from specific households discovering who is competent, reliable, and calm enough to transact with when stakes are high. So before any crisis, make a human balance sheet. List your household's hard skills, soft skills, tools, certifications, spare capacity, and local relationships. Then mark which of them remain useful with no internet, weak banking access, disrupted retail, and inconsistent law enforcement. That exercise is uncomfortable because it strips away prestige, but it also reveals a path forward. A fragile household becomes stronger not when it buys more status goods, but when it becomes locally legible as a node of real usefulness. And once you understand that, the blueprint becomes obvious. You do not prepare only supplies, you prepare exchange position. So here's the practical deliverable. Build a community barter network before you need one, not a militia fantasy, not a group chat full of slogans, a real local map. Start with 4 columns: people, skills, goods, trust level. Who nearby can fix plumbing, wiring, engines, locks, roofs, water filters, radios, bicycles, generators, or basic medical problems? Who can cook, preserve food, store supplies safely, translate paperwork, watch children, care for the elderly, or move goods discreetly? Who has tools? Who has space? Who has transport? Who has calm judgment under pressure? Then identify which relationships are strong enough to survive delayed payment, informal exchange, and mutual dependence. Because that is the real architecture. Not inventory alone. Confidence in delivery. Next, build low-drama reciprocity now. Exchange favors before crisis. Pay fairly. Keep your word. Learn who is punctual, discreet, sober, and competent. A network does not begin when the currency dies. It begins the first time 2 households solve a problem for each other. And remember it, and keep one caveat in view. Parallel economies are not pure. They attract counterfeiters, opportunists, local power brokers, and low-quality claims. Every emergency market does. So the goal is not utopia. The goal is a trusted circle with verifiable usefulness. That is the forensic lesson from broken systems. The lone wolf usually discovers too late that solitude is an expensive luxury. The network household has options. The isolated household has supplies. Then fear. Then bargaining weakness. When official money stops clearing reality, you face a binary choice. Be a spectator waiting for normality to return, or become a node people can still trade with.